Hey everyone! This week we're going to talk about Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is a really important chapter, I think, when it comes to figuring out critical thinking and a lot of the things that are going on in modern life. The topic of Chapter 6 is going to be basically under what conditions should we sort of treat other sources of information as reliable. So when people sort of tell us things, in a sense, almost like when should we believe them? When should we take their word for it? The main kind of argument we're going to look at is what's called an appeal to authority. But not all instances of people telling us things is the person speaking actually an authority themselves. A lot of the times what we're going to get is sort of secondhand reports about things that authorities maybe somewhere along the line said, but that people who are telling us these things aren't themselves authorities. There's a lot of talk in about the news and what else, like fake news and misinformation and all of that. And while these are all indeed serious problems, I think they're sort of mischaracterized a little bit. The problem isn't so much that there's fake news or literally just false information, right? That's what that would mean. There's always been false information in the world. This isn't a new problem. What's different is there are no accepted authorities anymore, or at least there's a real contentiousness and disagreement about who counts as an expert, who counts as an authority, and so things we could use to sort of sort misinformation from information, right, from trustworthy, reliable information. So we're going to spend today, this first video, just talking about appeals to authority. Then there'll be a subsequent video when we talk about more generally sort of problems of, quote-unquote fake news or misinformation, and how we can go about beginning to try to recognize it, and some of the challenges that are going to be involved in that sort of investigation and that kind of inquiry. So, I'm not going to really be able to solve the problems of modernity, but we'll at least maybe try to understand them a little bit better by the end of this week, and be in a better position to sort of start at least trying to get better at telling misinformation from information. Alright, so almost everything we believe, really, we believe because of other people. It's comparatively quite rare that you actually go out and investigate some topic entirely on your own, and reach opinions about the topic just because of your own investigation. We can think of all kinds of sort of like almost like goofy kind of examples of this, right? I mean, you all probably believe certain things about Russia or China or Japan. Probably most of you haven't visited those countries, though. The things that you believe, you're getting secondhand. Now, this isn't a problem, and it's not intended as a criticism. It's actually a really good thing that, in general, we can sort of take advantage of the research and the learning that has taken place before us. We don't have to start everything over again from scratch. Okay? Imagine if you really tried to actually do that, try to begin everything from scratch and not to believe anything that you yourself haven't verified for yourself. It's gonna be sort of crazy, right? I mean, you're not gonna even get to the first step. I mean, so much of it, even like, how do you grow food? You don't know that. If you had to investigate that for yourself from scratch, you would almost just not be taking advantage of all the good work people have done in the past. So the fact that we can sort of take advantage of other people's research, other people's information, what they've learned, and employ it without having to re-verify it, this is a really good thing, and it's a really great way that human sort of civilization as a whole can progress. Again, if I had to redo everything modern science has discovered, I wouldn't even, get 10 steps forward compared to all the things that we've developed by sort of building off of past established knowledge. But there's a downside to this fact that a lot of knowledge comes about sort of in these social ways. And that's that, honestly, people are kind of untrustworthy. At least a lot of the time, people either say things that they know are false, or they say things that they don't have as good of reasons to believe as true as they think they do. There's sort of this fundamental problem. Humans just have a tendency to be more confident in their beliefs than is warranted by the evidence. And so there's an ancient philosopher, the guy who I study the most, named Socrates, who argued that the height of human wisdom isn't really knowing things, it's actually being aware of when we don't know things. When we hold some belief, but we're actually more confident in that belief than we should, and sort of reining that confidence back in. So as a result of this tendency to sort of just be more confident in our beliefs than we should be, people often spread what we can call kind of misinformation, right? Things that are sort of presented as if they're sort of verified, established pieces of human knowledge that really haven't actually lived up to that sort of standard, and so are sort of untrustworthy, things that can lead us astray. A lot of the time, this isn't super important. We talked earlier in the semester about sort of gossiping, right, and why gossiping is kind of fun. The stakes with gossip usually aren't that high. But if we're talking about whether or not vaccines cause autism, the stakes are quite high, and if our beliefs on that topic aren't poorly formed, there are real consequences. And indeed, not only are there real consequences for me, but because of modern information technology ways of spreading information, misinformation is able to sort of spread far more rapidly than it previously would have been. So we have sort of a new challenge, a new dilemma. How can we sort of more precisely deal with all of the information we're constantly bombarded with, given that we ourselves don't have the time or the capacity in a lot of cases to analyze it for ourselves? There are whole domains of knowledge, whole sort of areas of study that it's almost impossible for a non-expert to evaluate. If you asked me, hey, Paul, decide between the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics and the many-world interpretation of quantum mechanics, I don't even know where I'd begin. I don't have the capacity, I don't have enough knowledge, I'm not an expert in the field of quantum mechanics that would be needed to even begin to come to any kind of informed opinion on my own about topics in quantum mechanics. Similarly, a lot of things in modern medicine are so complicated that I really can't figure them out. And I'm a doctor, medicine, but I have a PhD, right? I mean, you'd suspect I'm probably one of the higher educated people in the world, and yet there are whole ranges of knowledge, whole topics that I wouldn't really trust myself very much to be able to figure out what's true and false, even if I did have the time to actually seriously investigate those topics. So one solution to this problem of sort of one, misinformation, and two, the fact that there are some domains of knowledge that it just seems like it would be difficult for us to reach any sort of rigorous conclusions on unless we're already experts in the field, is that we can rely upon a kind of argumentation that's called an appeal to authority. So appeal to authorities effectively are what your mom and dad or your parents did when you would ask a question, you're like, why do I have to go to bed now? And they'd say, because I say so. That's basically an appeal to authority, actually. It's an argument that claims you should believe something because someone who is an expert says that that thing is true. And that's the only premise, in effect. So it's not really giving you reasons to think that the conclusion is true, so much as it's saying an expert says the conclusion is true, so therefore you should go along with what it is that the expert says. So let's look at a specific example of this kind of argument. So, according to experts in climate science, human-caused global warming is occurring, so therefore you should believe that and act on the basis of that conclusion. Notice that in this argument, we're not really giving you any reason to believe that global warming is occurring, right? We're not looking at the scientific studies. We're not, even in this very simple version that I presented, we're not even giving you some sort of like maybe common-sensey way of thinking about the problem. Right? We're simply saying the experts say that this is true, so therefore you should believe that it's true. And so note a couple features of arguments of this sort. They're going to be inductive. The fact that an expert says something, that's not enough to ensure that the conclusion is certainly true. They're also still going to be probative kinds of arguments. Either the value of the expert testimony could change over time if we learn new things about the person who's claiming to be an expert. For example, if I discover the person who's telling me something is a pathological liar, that will lessen the import of the testimony that I'm receiving. But it can also change if new evidence causes the expert to change what it is that they say as well. Okay? So in both ways, we've got a probative argument, right? Something that we're given good reasons to believe that something is true, but that reason could be indeed overturned on the basis of new evidence. So when you're evaluating arguments of this sort, the primary thing that you are going to be concerned with is really just how much weight to attribute to the expert. How much authority does the expert really indeed possess? And this is not an all-or-nothing decision. Indeed, because you sort of expect that because it's an inductive argument, right? I mean, sometimes you might well discover some reasons for caution or concern when a kind of expert testimony, but not so severe ones that you will actually just outright ignore what they say. Maybe you'll just be a little bit less confident in the conclusion that you reached. On the other hand, other times we're going to find sort of severe problems with an expert testimony that will cause us to reject it altogether. So that's going to be basically sort of the way we're going to sort of analyze these kinds of arguments. We're going to try to sort of see, okay, what would an expert need to possess in order to be able to sort of speak authoritatively enough on a topic that I should believe them just because they're saying it. Alright, so that'll do it for the first sort of introductory video. Next video, we'll spend looking at what makes these arguments by authority good or bad. We're going to go through a list of 7 criteria.